Hi everyone, welcome to Diary of an Overseas Dentist. In today's session, we are starting off with a fundamental skill, that is placing a matrix band for a tooth prepared to receive an amalgam restoration. We will first focus on correct band placement, and once that is secured, we will move on to packing and carving the amalgam as it should be done in the exam, but that's for later. Now let's see how a matrix band is done for this particular tooth. Before that, if you see these retention grooves, these are not provided in the exam model. We create them ourselves to mechanically lock the amalgam in place, especially when the preparation is wide. Now, this is a typical cavity preparation you will see in the exam. Notice that the distal contact is completely broken, while the mesial still has slight contact remaining. However, in the actual exam setting, assume that both mesial and distal contacts needs to be rebuilt. Okay, so always place your matrix with the aim of creating proper proximal contacts on both sides, which is a very important criteria. Now you will see these steps and ledges prepared. These are important as they help you seat the matrix band properly and guide the formation of contact points. And for this case, we'll be using a size 2 matrix band. The reason is the cavity is quite deep and we also need to rebuild the cusp height. A size 1 band would sit too low and wouldn't give us enough height, right? Now have a look at the band. You will notice it has a wing or a lip on one side. Here's a very simple rule to remember. Whatever side is facing you when loading the band into the retainer, that's the side that will sit gingerly. Now, before we place the matrix, let's talk about wedge selection, because this is something that gets overlooked, but it really makes a difference. All right. Now, for this case, I will be using a slim Jim wedge, which is a medium-sized wedge shaped like an equilateral triangle, if you can see. Yeah. Now, meaning all the three sides are equal. When placing it, always remember the pointed apex of the triangle should face towards the occlusal surface. Since we are working on both the mesial and distal, I'll be using 2 wedges. Now, let me clear a very common misconception we all have when we start out, which is most of us think, oh, if I wedge tight enough, I'll get a good contact. That is not true. The purpose of the wedge is to secure the matrix band tightly against the gingival margin and create a natural contour, so your restoration does not end up as a flat, straight wall. If you only place a band without wedging, imagine you'll pack amalgam and get a straight vertical wall. And that's not how a tooth is shaped, correct? So you want a contour. So please remember this clearly. Wedges help create contour, not contact. Contacts are created during burnishing and condensation, not by the wedge. I hope that clears it up. Remember to use tweezer while handling wedges at all times during the exam, as it is a very important part of your infection control. While placing matrix bands, in the technical day, you can do it either way. Buccally, palatally, lingually, it really doesn't matter. All right, all we are focusing on is to not have any disturbance while building our cusp. So in this case, we will put the retainer buccally. And it is good to keep the retainer opposite to the cusp we are building. Okay, so in this case, we are building a lingual cusp, so the retainer goes buccally. Tighten the matrix band, the retainer, and make sure that the band is secure in the retainer before putting it on. Now, once the band is in, push it with cotton or a gauze piece. Do not use your fingers as the matrix bands are very sharp. All right, even in the exam, always push it down with the gauze piece in your hand or a cotton roll. Now you can also take help of your flat plastic. Here I'm using a condenser, anything flat to actually adapt it very nicely. Size 2 bands are subgingival bands. That means once the band is placed, you should not be able to see the wing above the gum. If you can still see it, it means it hasn't been seated properly. All right, so push it down gently until it disappears below the gingival margin. Now, what you can do is take a flat plastic or an instrument that is not very sharp, pull the gum and try to push the band inside. Again, please use a gauze piece and push it in, and now you tighten it. Now, as you see, the band is in, and the things we need to check for is to not have a gap mesially, distally, and where we are going to build the cusp. All right, make sure the band is very tight so that you do not have any spaces anywhere. And we will start to place the wedges now. And now we come to the final and one of the most important steps before packing the amalgam, which is the burnishing for contact. Technically, you can burnish at 3 different areas, but I personally focus only on the contact zones because that's what the marking criteria emphasizes. You must have a single well-defined contact point, not a broad area of contact running along the entire proximal wall, right? So to achieve that, 1 point contact, here's what I do. Take the larger end of your burnisher, apply firm pressure exactly at the point where you want your contact to form. Do this both mesially and distally, but only at one spot, not across the wall. Alright. This targeted burnishing gives you a tight, precise contact point and reduces the amount of finishing and contouring you need to do after the carving. Now, some people burnish over the cusp area or the occlusal step. Personally, I don't feel the need to do that. As long as your matrix band is well adapted with no visible gaps or a smooth contour, the cusp and the tooth restoration junction will form naturally during condensation and carving. Let's talk about a very common issue many candidates face, specifically with 3/6 amalgam fillings. Look at the contour, the natural contour of a lower left first molar, the 3/6, right? Now tell me if this has happened to you and drop it in the comments and let me know how you managed it. You finish the filling and realize that the cusp you built has tilted too far inwards towards the lingual and the buccal contour looks overbuilt. This makes the tooth look bulky on the buccal side and collapsed on the lingual, which immediately throws off the anatomy and can lose your marks, right? And why does this happen almost always with 3/6? Because when placing the matrix band on 3/6, it has a tendency to fall inward more than it does on 4/6. If you don't catch this and correct it before condensation, the amalgam will follow that inward slant and you will end up with a cusp that doesn't align with the natural distolingual cusp. So here's the tip. Always visually align your rebuilt cusp with the natural distolingual cusp. Look from the occlusal view before condensation. Check that your band hasn't collapsed inward. If the band is leaning in, reposition or support it before packing. And how you can do that while packing is always try to condense along the band. All right, do not push it laterally towards the band, but condense amalgam along the band. All right, that wraps up the matrix band placement and contouring tips for 3/6 amalgam. If you found this helpful, please let me know in the comments and I'll see you in the next one.